Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to the folks on the West Coast. My name is Tyler Newberry. I'll be your host and moderator for the StorTrends Virtual Lunch and Learn today. We greatly appreciate everybody taking the time to be with us today. With me today is got a couple of presenters for you today. One is our Senior Solutions Engineer, George Rodriguez, as well as Senior Account Executive, Todd Chidoba. Those guys will be doing the presentation and getting started in just the next few minutes. But before they hopped on, just want to take care of a few quick housekeeping items before we begin. So number one, this is a virtual lunch and learn, so like I said, pizza is included. If you included pizza on your registration form, that pizza should be arriving within the next few minutes if it hasn't already. Sometimes the delivery person can run just a few minutes behind, but be sure to let us know if your pizza has not arrived by 1:15 Eastern time. Again, that's going to be 12:15 Central, 11:15 Mountain, and obviously, folks on the West Coast, your pizzas will be arriving at 11 a.m. local time, so 11 a.m. Pacific time, because that's usually the earliest that the restaurants will open. But either way, let us know if your pizza has not arrived by 1:15 Eastern time, and we'll get in touch with the pizza company and try to figure out what's going wrong there. But until then, it just might be running a few minutes late. Email is the best way to let us know. I'll put my email in the chat screen so you guys can email that, like I said, if you have any questions or issues on the pizza. Number two, we want this to be as much of an interactive presentation as possible, so if you guys could ask questions, if you want clarification on anything that we're talking on, please feel free to just shoot those questions and those comments over on the Q&A communicator located at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll get to your question either live on air or we'll shoot you an answer back on the Q&A communicator. But like I said, we'd love to get a good discussion going for this event today. And lastly, if we have any technical difficulties, we just ask, please be patient. Sometimes WebEx will get a little funky on us. The audio might get a little grainy or the screen resolution may not be so great for a moment, but it usually does a pretty good job of resolving itself in a few seconds. But that's all I got for the boring stuff. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Todd for part one of the presentation on all-flash hybrid and spinning disk storage.
Very good. Thank you, Tyler. Welcome, everybody, to the Lunch and Learn today. Like Tyler pointed out, this will be a discussion about the different types of architecture that are out there in the market today, whether it be all flash or hybrid or spinning disk storage. Obviously, a little bit about the different architectures, what StorTrends brings to the table as far as these different architectures and whatnot. So just real quick, like Tyler already pointed out, I'm Todd Chidoba. I'm a Senior Account Executive for our channel division, which includes StorTrends and our Snap VDI products. I've been with the company now for over 24 years. I've been, involved in both pre-sales as well as post-sales functions. I've worked as a hardware engineer at AMI for a number of years here before moving into the storage department and then again into sales. Also, we're going to have with us one of our solutions engineers, George Rodriguez. He's been with AMI for a number of years now as well. He's also has experience with some of the different products that AMI has to offer, as well as obviously being one of our solutions engineers for the storage team as well. So he'll be able to assist us with any of the technical questions that might come by, and also he'll be presenting the technical demo of our all-flash array here towards the end of part two of the presentation. So a little bit about what we're going to cover in this presentation. So right now we've got this earmarked to run about an hour. We usually will usually take up the full hour. If not, we'll try and wrap up about maybe a couple minutes early if depending on how things go. But anyways, we obviously want to be respectful for your time and go ahead and get this stuff done. So I'm going to run through the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about who AMI is, what StorTrends is, and obviously how we got our beginnings. We're going to talk a little bit about the landscape of the storage industry and the different architectures, like we pointed out, between the all-flash, the hybrid, and the spinning disks comparisons that are out there. We'll get into a little bit about some of the feature set and technology that our all-flash array has in it. One of the big things we like to talk about is our support, how our approach to support is. And then we'll get into part two of the presentation, which will be George walking us through a presentation of our all-flash array. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get rolling here. So, American Megatrends is who we are. AMI it might be something that most of us recognize. We are a worldwide company. We've been around since 1985. We are headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia. That's actually where Tyler, myself, and George sit right now. We are a very heavily engineering-focused company. We've primarily played in the OEM industry. We're not a big, marketing firm like some of the other big acronym names that are out there. So, obviously we're doing events like this to get our names out there and talk about what it is that we bring to the table. Through the different product lines that we've got, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these different product lines in the next couple slides, but through the different product lines that we've got, we actually ship in more than half the computers in the world today. So if you stop and kind of think about the number of computers that are out there, and to have a stake in over half of them that are shipping is obviously a large thing for us to say here. Again, we are very engineering focused. We definitely have a lot of innovative IP. We've got over 375 patents in the company. More than 125 of those are granted just in our storage products alone. So again, between the different products, we ship in over billions of products. Obviously, ISO certification, making sure our procedural stuff is done and followed is very important to us. Our mission statement is to provide our customers with the highest quality of products, the first time and every time. And, if you talk to some of our reference customers, I think you'll understand why. So, AMI, I know a lot of people are like, what is AMI? That sounds familiar. I do, a lot of events. We do a lot of trade shows and whatnot. So oftentimes we've got a banner or something like that, and I'm usually talking about StorTrends or Snap VDI. But, people will see the logo and they're like, I'm talking to them, giving them my pitch, and you'll see the light bulb go off with who I'm talking to, and they'll recognize the logo that you see on the screen here. So AMI is the old BIOS company. That is us. We have been around since 1985. Of course, we've been the #1 BIOS provider for that essentially the entire time. This product is shipped in pretty much every computer platform you can think of, whether it be servers or storage, desktop, embedded systems, thin clients, etc. You go down the list, and that's where you're going to find BIOS in there. For those of you that aren't aware, that's essentially a firmware that's on a motherboard or some kind of controller board that's going to relay hardware information to an operating system. So it's basically a handshake between the hardware and the actual operating system. So this is our company. It's, again, still the mainstay of the company, been around, since day one, and is still, obviously one of our big part of who we are. Another area that we've been extremely successful over the last, number of years is remote access management. So we've got a product called MegaRack, which basically is IPMI, remote KVM, virtual USB, those types of products. And again, this is very much an OEM product. So if you've used some of the IPMI type of devices that are out there, if you're familiar with like a DRAC or an ILO type of product, a lot of those are actually utilizing, code that we wrote that they actually that they licensed from us. So we've actually been shipping this since 1997. Again, we've deployed this across a number of large platforms that are out there, and is still one of our big mainstays for the company right now as well. Something that a lot of folks don't necessarily, think of American Megatrends with is storage. However, we've actually got a long history of storage. For those of us that have been around for quite a while, you might remember the old MegaRAID card. This was a RAID controller card that was very prominent in the mid to late 90s. This is our actual product. We designed this from the ground up. This was the #1 shipping RAID controller card during this time. It was recognized by the Gartner Magic Quadrant as the #1 RAID vendor. as basically time progressed, technology, of course, is always moving, and it made really a lot more sense to move that RAID technology down to a silicone layer. At this point, you know, it made business sense for us to go ahead and sell this division off to a company that would be able to actually do the silicone type of fabrication that was required to do that. We're not a silicone company. We're a software company is what we are. So in 2001, we actually sold this product division off to LSI Logic. Since then, this has still been a very popular, RAID stack that's been selling across all kinds of platforms since then. I think now it's actually known as Avago or Broadcom, I think, may be a part of that as well. So anyways, this is still a product that's out there selling. Has been written from the ground up by actually us. So after the 2001 sell-off, we of course had to step out of the storage game for a handful of years as a non-compete, as you could imagine. After the non-compete had expired, we actually brought back that core development team that was key in writing the code for MegaRAID, and we began writing the code for what is now known as StorTrends, our data storage division of American Megatrends, and that's what we're here talking about today. So in short, StorTrends itself is, our own, product that we've written, from the base code all the way up. Excuse me. We're not just another company getting, some Linux-based code and just slapping a bezel on a chassis and calling ourselves a storage company. We actually have the meat and potatoes that are written into the code for our product itself. StorTrends started as, we were kind of OEM focused. We did a lot of projects that were what we call direct OEM, if you will. We basically had customers that had very specific needs from a storage device that they couldn't get from an off-the-shelf storage commodity. So they would come to us. We had our base stack. We would write, whether it be security code or something like that, that would make sure that, what they needed was actually being served from the storage itself. We went with this model for a while, but after a number of years, there was a lot of product acquisition or storage acquisitions that occurred in the industry. And really, a handful of years back, we decided that it made the most sense for us to go customer-facing, and that's when we started getting into our channel division and actually selling to end users and having an open product like that. We entered the market with our all-spinning 3400 array. As, of course, technology progresses, we brought in our hybrid array where we have SSDs and a mixture of SSDs as well as spinning drives. And then over the last couple of years, we've really been focused on the 3610 as well as the 2610, which are our all-flash offerings in the SAN market. So, as a storage company, people usually ask, well, what verticals do you guys normally serve? As most of you guys probably know, data certainly isn't limited to a particular vertical. I'm sure that on the call today, we've got folks that represent pretty much every vertical that's out there. We, of course, have deployments in pretty much all the verticals you could imagine. Obviously, we've got, deployments in education, finance, healthcare, manufacturing, legal, retail, obviously all the bullet points that you see on the screen here. Long story short, everybody's got data. We are a block-based storage device, and obviously we're going to lend ourselves well to pretty much whatever vertical that you have out there. We do have thousands of installations worldwide, again, representing pretty much, whatever direction you want to go. Here's just kind of a screen capture of a handful of our customers. As you can see here, we do span a number of different areas. Obviously, we see ourselves in a lot of small local government. We see ourselves in a lot in healthcare, finance. Again, you name it, we've got a footprint in there somewhere and reference customers to talk to it. So that's a little bit about our history, where we came from, who we are. Now let's get into a little bit about, why it is that we're here. Understanding what's going on and what it is that drives you to an event such as this. Obviously, there's sometimes folks run into technical difficulties such as, high latency, or they're running into problems where, their old storage array isn't keeping up with, their advancing applications and whatnot. So a lot of times people will have high latency. They see, all flash or hybrid, and they're saying, okay, well, this might be something for us. So obviously, we want to overcome some of those slowdowns and the user experiences that's going on. Sometimes we have new projects. VDI is certainly a key product that's going on out there, and a lot of folks are moving towards a VDI infrastructure. Obviously, VDI brings in a lot of performance needs or performance demands that are required to run a smooth operating VDI infrastructure. As a sidebar, one of our channel products is Snap VDI, where basically we've got a VDI solution that's an all-in-one solution. We've got all your licensing and hardware and management tools all built into a very nice, clean product. This is something that certainly we can provide you any information on that you need if you need a whole freestanding VDI solution from top to bottom. Obviously, from a storage perspective, a lot of times people might already have some small VDI that they're doing. They want to expand upon that. Storage is certainly an area that's going to be required, and that's where you start, talking about some of the SSDs and the all-flash and hybrid arrays helping assist with those VDI projects. Storage upgrades. I mean, obviously, a lot of folks, you run your storage. Again, everyone's got data. Data certainly doesn't go away. I've been in AMI for, 24 plus years now. I'm ashamed to probably admit how old of some of the emails and stuff that I actually have. So, as a lot of you can understand, storage doesn't go away, and it just does nothing but get larger. So, obviously, capacity issues run into this. Your storage gets older. You need to upgrade. So obviously, you're wanting to understand what's out there. Sometimes a company will have a new acquisition or add a division, or they'll have some new project that's going to demand some additional storage. So obviously, that's going to, bring you to an event like this to learn, well, what is it that StorTrends has to offer, and what are they bringing to the table? Some of us are just, doing some planning. You don't have a storage project or a storage need at the time, but you want to keep your, finger on the pulse and what all's going on out there and all of that. So certainly a lot of folks are here to just learn about what it is that we offer. The last one's a little bit of a joke. This is just, we do these events, whether they're live or whether they're these virtual type events, and we'll follow up oftentimes and ask, well, what is it that you learned? Is there something I can help you out with? Do you have a project? We had one gentleman about a year and a half ago had responded to one of these contacts, and he basically said, look, you were going to send me a free pizza, so I like pizza, so I took it. So that's okay too. If you're here for the pizza, I hope that perhaps you get a little information about what we bring to the table, and when you are looking at some storage, that you'll keep us in mind. So either way, welcome everybody, and hopefully we're able to assist in some way here. So this slide here I like to show, this is really a good kind of an outline of the different architectures that are alive and well in pretty much all of our infrastructures at some point, at some place. They also represent the different architectures that we actually bring to the table as well, and we can get into a little bit about how we're approaching each one of these as we're going through. So the first one is a spinning disk array. So this is going to be a SAN array that's going to be comprised of 7,200 RPM drives, maybe 10,000 RPM drives, maybe 15,000 RPM drives, some mixture of each. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much you're going to take a set of disks, you're going to put them in a RAID set, and you're going to get the performance that the drives can bring to the table. For us, this is our 3400 array. We do still support this. Obviously, there's folks that don't have real performance needs. They just need some capacity. And this is obviously a great way, a good affordable way to just approach bulk storage that doesn't really require a whole lot of performance or whatnot. We do have tiering technology in our 3400, so we can mix and match different RAID sets, different disk types. So obviously we can achieve different performance profiles, but again, it will be limited to the speed of the spinning drives as well. Obviously, if we fast forward, again, we see that technology always changing, the advent of the SSD, and not just the advent, obviously SSDs have been around for quite a long time, but the price of them have come down tremendously over the last number of years. The reliability of them has increased tremendously over the last number of years. So a good place for a lot of folks who maybe are operating on spinning drives today that are considering moving into the next generation, a move to hybrid is oftentimes a real good place to go. So basically a hybrid is going to be, as you could imagine, it's basically a mixture of both SSDs as well as spinning drives in a single SAN array. For us, this is going to be our 3500 offering. Basically what we've got here is well, let me rephrase this for a second here. Both the 3400 and 3500 are built on a dual controller 3U 16-bay chassis. So for our 3500, what we're going to do is have 4 or 6 drives that are going to be dedicated to an SSD performance tier. And then we're going to have, probably around 10 drives, 8 to 10 drives, depending on the number of drives that we have on the hot tier that are going to be, that will be NLSAS spinning drives. In the middle of that, we'll also have a couple of drives that are going to be dedicated to cache. That'll assist with the promotion and demotion as well as keeping performance going during live I/O. Obviously, the benefit of doing a hybrid array is you're going to get an area, if you've got some performance demands for some very specific needs, oftentimes they can be satisfied with a cache layer. I'm sorry, not with a cache layer, but with an SSD tier layer where you can provide that performance to those very specific applications and whatnot. So then moving forward, of course, we can do an all-flash array as well. And this is going to be our 2610. That's our latest offering for the all-flash array. This one is a slightly different hardware option. This is a 2U 24-bay. Obviously, we'll get into a little bit more of the architecture and what we're doing as far as the I/O load through the 2610 and some slides coming up. But of course, an all-flash array is going to be for those of us that have, some really high-performance needs. You're trying to get the best bang for your buck as far as getting performance as well as capacity out of SSDs, but even your older data is requiring to have, a lot of high performance and a lot of low latency. So, again, we'll get into more of the architecture of what the 2610 is. But again, these are pretty much architectures that if you go throughout the industry, folks are going to be following one of these types of architectures that are out there. Just a real quick rundown of what the hardware looks like for the different products that we've got and how we've evolved. The 3610 was our first option for an all-flash array. We've now evolved that. We've matured the hardware into our 2610. The 2U 24-bay chassis just made a lot more sense for us. This is a bit of an eye chart, so I'm not going to get into all of this. At the end of the day, this is really just the 3400 is an all-spinning array. Our 3500 is our hybrid with both SSDs as well as spinning drives, and then our 2610 is our all-flash model. All of these are dual controller, active-passive type configurations. These are all expandable via SAS connectivity to, it'll be basically a dual path connection to a JBOD. This is a really good way of scaling out all of your capacity as well as performance without actually having to buy additional heads and pay that additional money for, CPUs and memory that are going along when really all you're trying to do is add, either capacity or just more performance. So that's just kind of a cross-section of what the different, different architectures that we bring to the table. Performance is obviously a big factor when we're trying to determine, well, what is it that's going to fit my needs the most? you know, if you go back to when we were all playing in just the spinning disc world, you know, IOPS was the key metric when it came to measuring, well, what is it, the performance that I'm going to get? So IOPS, 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 that's what we always heard. And of course, what did you do to get more IOPS? You obviously went to either a different RAID set, you would go to, you know, a different drive type, you would go to the 15,000 RPM SAS drives. But the biggest thing that we would all do is we would just add more spindles. The more spindles would add up to higher IOPS. Well, the problem is, while IOPS is certainly an important measure that, you know, everybody is going to be concerned with, the problem is that, you know, you also end up with a lot of latencies. And that's really going to be where you're going to see the difference in a performance perspective from these different types of offerings. So, you know, obviously there's data sets that really aren't going to be heavily worried, you know, that you're heavily worried about latency, and obviously there's going to be other data sets that you are going to be very worried about it. So basically, at the end of the day, the measure of performance nowadays, especially when you're talking about an SSD type of offering here, is not necessarily IOPS, because basically, you know, a single SSD is going to be able to give you, you know, 20, 30, 50,000 IOPS per drive, right? So that's not as big of a concern today as much as latency is. You know, the administrators out there that are operating your, you know, your virtual environments nowadays, I'm sure can attest to latency being, you know, one of their major problems. So basically what we've got here is a chart, and these are all comparing our own products to each other. So this isn't me saying I'm better than one of my competitors as far as this goes. This is really more talking about the architectures, if you will. So what we've got is the top line here, that red line. That's going to be representative of one of our spinning discs arrays. So this is an actual test where we were running this and actually doing you know, 8K blocks at 70 and 30, which is a very standard type of I/O metric, if you will. And basically what you're seeing is, you know, the actual latency is really high. It's also very inconsistent. It's very high, then it drops, and it goes high again as well. If you go down to the next line, that green line, this is reflective of the results from our hybrid array. This is, while obviously it's considerably lower, you'll still see some ups and downs, and as you see towards the end of the chart here, it starts to smooth out a little bit, but it is still a little bit up and down. And what that is you know, data coming in, or we're flushing data from the hot tier to the low tier. As we get down the road here, we start normalizing the data, we start understanding the blocks, and things start getting a little bit smoother. But there's still, you know, we're still in that, you know, 5 millisecond, maybe a little less as an average here. Where you go down to that bottom line, the blue one, that's basically going to be, that's not basically, that is the results from our all-flash array. Obviously, you're seeing, you know, sub 1 millisecond latency here, and the bigger thing is that it's a lot more understandable. You're not going to get surprised. It's a much smoother flow here. So, you know, the I/O is going to be much more dependable, and you can count on it being a low latency when you need it. So, okay, great. What is it that you know, that's important to all of us? Is, of course, we've got a budget that we've got to follow. So, you know, obviously for us, one of the things we like to do is be up front, make sure everybody's on the same page. We've got a nice tool that's on our website. If you go to StorTrends.com, there is a price quote generator. We'll ask a handful of questions here. Obviously, we need to know your capacity. We're looking, you know, what kind of an IOP, you know, what are you guys looking at from a performance perspective? You know, what type of applications are you running, et cetera. It'll help us identify what it is that you're trying to do, and we can give you some good ideas, some good ballpark ideas as far as where prices go and where each of our different architectures are going to fit from a pricing perspective. So let's go ahead and move forward. I'd like to get into a little bit more of the architecture of our all-flash array and talk about some of the feature sets that we bring to the table. You know, the 2610, the major thing I like to point out on this particular slide is, and this isn't just for the 2610, this is really kind of for everybody, for all of the products that we've got in our product family, and is that it's not just a box of discs that, you know, we've got whatever features that we have, or we're not shooting for just performance. This is a full-fledged storage array. So we've got enterprise features that are going to span, you know, what you would expect out of an enterprise type of storage device. 2610 is going to be bringing in dedupe and compression, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But all of our options are going to have a lot of tiering that's going to be involved here, snapshots, auto tiering, the way that we're handling our RAID sets. Replication is a big deal as far as our feature sets goes. An important thing to point out at this point here is that this is an all-inclusive feature set. So regardless of what architecture that you're looking for from StorTrends, we're going to come at a single price point. And of course, that price point is going to be dictated by, you know, what types of drives that we're using, the capacity that we're utilizing, et cetera. But everything's going to come out of the box at a single price point. We're not going to ding you for, oh, you wanted to turn on snapshots, oh, you wanted to have thin provisioning, you wanted to have, you know, whatever. We're not going to hit you with an additional licensing fee for turning on any of those types of features. They're going to come out of the box ready to go. Excuse me, I'm kind of overcoming a little bit of a cold here. Anyways, as far as the 2610 goes, you know, we are bringing in dedupe and compression. This is obviously where we're going to start getting the dollar per gig for going to an all-flash array down as low as we possibly can. We're going to, in the 2610, we're going to actually operate both a read as well as a write optimized tier. And we'll get into that a little bit more. The in-lift cache is going to be where we're going to utilize the different writing and where we're maintaining the blocks. Obviously, we're keeping SSD endurance as well as performance in mind. This next line, the 100+ configurations, this is an important thing to point out. We're very flexible when it comes to what our configurations are going to be. We mix and match a number of different drive sizes and whatnot, so that way we can actually meet what your fingerprint requires. We're not going to try and shoehorn you into one of 2 or 3 models that we have. We can actually, you know, understand what your environment is requiring, and of course we can, you know, we can tailor a configuration around your needs rather than try and tailor your needs around our configurations. Obviously, VMware integration, if you're not, you know, playing obviously in a virtualized environment, then you're obviously not playing in the storage game very well. We certainly recognize that probably 98% of our customer base is running some sort of a virtualized environment. Obviously, from all-flash array, what are you expecting? We're expecting to see, obviously, a superior latency reduction, sub-milliseconds. You know, obviously, again, we'll get into some of the data compaction configurations and whatnot, but obviously that's going to bring a huge value to what our offerings are. Obviously, the all-flash array is going to play extremely well in high-performance databases, mixed workloads, clearly virtual environments, as well as VDI as well. So, dedupe and compression. This is actually going to be where, you know, this is going to be a feature set that's going to be exclusive to our all-flash array. Reason being, while the cost of SSDs has certainly come down over the last handful of years, they're still certainly more expensive, and the ability and their capabilities as far as capacity goes is still less than what, you know, we're able to get out of traditional spinning drives. So how do we compensate for that? We actually introduced dedupe and compression into our all-flash arrays, and this obviously is going to help us, you know, achieve far greater capacity than what the physical disks are actually giving us. Generally speaking, we see about a 4-to-1 data compaction ratio with our customer base. And what does that mean? So if I've got I can basically purchase 10 terabytes of actual SSD capacity, but I could actually service about 40 terabytes of actual data. So obviously that's going to be a considerable price decrease instead of having to purchase, of course, 40 terabytes of all flash drives. What is that going to do for us? Obviously that's going to give us, you know, a huge amount of IOPS. We're going to be able to easily achieve 120,000 IOPS with an all-flash array. Again, that latency that we keep talking about is going to be sub 1 millisecond. And what we're doing that's going to maintain a tremendous amount of performance as well as capacity is we're going to have a mixed all-flash tier as well as an all-flash cold tier. And I'll get into that in just a second here to tell you a little bit, to help you understand a bit about how we're approaching that and why it's important. Obviously, we patent all of the stuff we're doing. We've got over 6 patents that are around just our dedupe and compression alone. And again, if you talk to our reference customers, you'll find that you know that our dedupe and compression is extremely effective. All right, so we've talked a bit about the tiering and the cold tiers and this hot tier, and well, what is all of this stuff? So basically what we're doing in the architecture of the 2610, our all-flash array, this is a 2U 24-bay chassis, and what we've got is 8 drives are going to be dedicated to what we call a hot tier. We're going to have 14 drives that are going to be dedicated to what we call a read tier, an archive tier, a cold tier, whatever verbiage you want to use there. In between there, we've got a caching layer. This is what we're utilizing this for. We've got a feature called in-lift cache. So essentially, what we're doing is on our hot tier, we don't do any dedupe or we don't do any compression. That is just going to be the sheer performance that the SSDs are going to be able to perform. I don't care what anyone says, whatever vendor you're talking to, if they're doing complete inline dedupe and compression, there is an overhead to doing that. Obviously, there's tables, metadata tables, there's all kinds of stuff that we're comparing blocks to as they're incoming, and clearly that's going to have some sort of an overhead, and it's going to have, you know, some bearing on the performance that you're seeing, whether it's from an IOP or a latency perspective. Our initial 3610, we did have all inline dedupe, and obviously you're still getting the performance of SSDs, but you're not getting everything that you can get out of the SSDs when you're doing that inline. So what we've done is we're kind of doing the best of both worlds. Again, that hot tier, we're not going to be encumbered at all by any dedupe or compression, so therefore we're going to be able to provide, you know, the highest performance that the SSDs are capable of performing right there. But we still need to get some capacity out of this guy. So we've got a cold tier. In that cold tier, we actually is where we're doing our dedupe and compression. So basically, as blocks get older, we'll actually start demoting these colder blocks down to our cold tier, and in doing so, we're going to run it through our dedupe and compression engine. This is where we're going to start getting a lot of the benefits of additional capacity for the SSDs. Now, what happens when you start trying to access some of those blocks that have been demoted? Well, what's going to happen is we're actually going to have that first access to that block is going to come from the dedupe and compressed layer. Still going to get a high amount of performance out of it, certainly a lot higher than what you would see out of a bunch of spinning drives, but again, it's not going to be quite as high as what you'd see on your high side, on the hot tier. So we're going to try and minimize that delay there by utilizing what we call in-lift cache. And this is where we're going to have 2 drives that are going to be in the middle that's going to kind of handle these blocks that are being accessed after they've been cold. So what will happen is I'll access a block that's already been demoted down to that cold tier. We'll recognize that, and before we start moving blocks back and forth between this hot and cold tier, we're actually going to monitor the usage of that block. So what we want to do is say, okay, you read this block. Is this something that was just an anomaly? Someone went back and just needed to check some old record or something like that? Or is this actually data that's going to come back live again, something that's going to be required to be back on that hot tier? we'll monitor that in this in-lift cache layer, and if we see that, you know what, this was just an anomaly, we're not actually utilizing this block, this is just, again, just was a quick look at something, we'll go ahead and, if there was any changes to the block, we'll then commit it back down to that cold tier. So this is kind of offline. It's not going to be something that's really going to impede your, your upfront daily performance. You've still got the capacity on that front end that's still performing all of your upfront stuff. So this is also going to be, the cache itself is going to protect the endurance of the drives themselves. Certainly SSDs have become a lot more stable in recent years, but they still do have a limited number of writes that are available to particular drives. So actually making sure that the endurance of the drive is maximized is extremely important. With the in-lift cache, we're able to actually guarantee 5 years of endurance. And as long as you're under one of our storage support warranties, we'll replace those drives at no cost if we actually start seeing that endurance is going to be exceeded. So anyway, that's a bit of the architecture of how the data flows through. I know that was a lot of information. Clearly, if we need more information or you would like to learn a bit more, we can certainly help you out with that. So at the end of the day, we've got all these different options, and you know what? Everybody's got a different need, and what is it that's going to fit the best for what it is that I've got? Hey, I've just got old, archive data. I don't really care about all this performance. We've got the 3400. But what is it that when I'm trying to determine between hybrid and all flash, one of the big things is going to be, well, what are you going to recognize from a data compaction ratio? I said earlier that, we typically see about a 4-to-1 for most of our customers that we have in the field utilizing the dedupe and compression in our all-flash array. However, there are data sets that are not going to, lend themselves particularly well to data compaction. That might be where we start looking at a hybrid array. Hybrid, of course, is going to fit extremely well when you've got, say you've got some very specific databases that you have, some performance needs that are there, but hey, I've got some user data or these other old backup files or something like that I wanted to put on my SAN as well. I don't need SSD space for that. All I need is capacity. A hybrid might be a good fit for you there. So obviously I just added more questions to it. I didn't really resolve anything yet, right? One of the things that we like to do is we don't like to guess about what it is that we're putting in front of our customer base. We take a very hands-on approach to when it comes to pre-sales. We'll either get in a room physically and do some whiteboarding with you on what your environment looks like. We'll give our expertise and our input as far as what we feel is the best configuration for you. But, obviously we can only talk, or, talking is only going to go so far. We've got a tool called iData. This is a free download off of our website, again, on StorTrends.com. Free to download, free to run, and basically what this will do is, if you're in a virtual environment, this will run at the host layer, basically point to all of your VMs, and what it'll do is basically collect the metrics the performance metrics that VMware is already collecting. This also works in a Hyper-V solution as well, so it would work certainly in Windows as well. And basically, we're not going to put any load on your on your existing environment. But what we're going to do is we're going to collect a bunch of performance metrics through the tool to help us really lay out what it is that your environment is actually doing. It's a very simple setup. We'll typically run it for 7 days. This way we can capture if you've got, backup windows that you do over a weekend or something like that. Obviously what we want to do is capture what you're really doing. It's going to help us identify what your capacity usage is. What are your read versus write ratios, which have a huge impact on performance. Is your bandwidth being utilized effectively? Obviously a big thing when it comes to talking about these tiered approaches to storage is understanding what your hot and cold data is. This tool, again, gives us actual metrics of what your environment will do, and it takes the guesswork out of what a configuration that's going to make sense for you is. So I highly encourage everybody to go to our website, download the tool. Even if you're not looking at a storage solution today, it's a really good tool to help you even identify everything that's really going on. So, I mean, if you've got a problem VM that's not doing what you're expecting, this is a good place to go to understand, hey, do I have disk latencies going on? Is my network being bogged down, et cetera? So, I mean, this is a really good tool for you to identify your environment. Obviously, for us, it's a really good tool to help us identify what a good configuration would be for you guys. All right. One thing I want to touch on, one last thing I want to touch on before I turn this over to George and let him get into the actual look and feel for what our UI is for that all-flash array is. Our storage support. This is what we call our support program. This is obviously extremely important. As a company who's been around for 30-plus years, we certainly understand the value of providing good support. You know, as long as I've been in this industry, it's not a question of if something is going to break or go wrong. It's really going to be about how a company stands behind their product and actually supports it when something does go a little sideways. So, obviously, you know, we're doing our support all out of our headquarters here in Atlanta, Georgia. We are a 24/7 shop, so we've got actual engineers that are answering the phone when people call on our StorTrends products. This is not an answering service or a help desk that someone's just going to take your name and maybe run you through, you know, I like to say the cable company style of, well, did you unplug it and did you plug it back in? We're not going to run you through all of that. We're actually going to have an engineer on the phone that's actually answering your questions as they're there. We are next business day on-site support or part replacement, I should say. We do have a no downtime maintenance windows. With this being an active passive type of configuration, we can basically keep the box up while we're doing our firmware upgrades. We still do recommend that we do have a maintenance window, but we can, if absolutely necessary, we can certainly do a maintenance update without bringing the system down. One of the things that comes out of the box with our storage support is our proactive healthcare monitoring, and basically what that's doing is we can be our support team can be the recipient of your actual critical and warning alerts that are going on. So, you've always got a set of your eyes on your system at all times. So on Sunday night when you're watching a football game, you're going to always have a set of eyes that are still there. So if something goes on and you're not paying attention to your email alerts, you do still have a team that's actually doing that. This is very effective. Oftentimes, if there's some issue, say a drive fails or something like that, we'll oftentimes get an RMA process before a customer even realizes there was something going on. Obviously, in an SSD environment, the endurance guarantee is certainly important. So we're constantly monitoring the endurance of that. That's easily seen in the UI as well. We do have our support terms of 1, 3, and 5 years. We can incrementally increase them year over year if that's the better way. But a couple things I like to add to this. Our approach to support is a little bit different. We actually have accounts that are going to be dedicated to our engineers. So oftentimes when you call in, you're actually going to get the same people on the phone that are familiar already with what your environment is, so that we're going to take a lot of the time away from, well, what's your configuration, what are you running? We're already going to have all of that knowledge there when you call. Our support has been something that, if you talk to our reference customers, a huge part of our success. So again, support, obviously a big thing. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the ball over to George. I feel like I've taken up all the time here. So George, hope you have enough time to get through here and get everything shown that you like.
I should have enough time. All right, cool. So one of the things I like to open up with is for this demo, obviously it's going to be a pretty brief demo. I don't want to keep you wait too long. But if you are interested in seeing a more in-depth demo, you can get in contact with us, and I'd be happy to sit down with you and poke around as much as you'd like. You can see here I have the UI up. I open it up in Chrome. You can use whatever browser you want. It is web-based. You just put in an IP that's configured on the system. Then you put in your password, and off we should go. And so what we're trying to do with, I don't know if I hit caps or not. What we're trying to do with the UI here is make it as simple as, why is it not logging in? Why is it just?
The magic of a live demo.
Isn't it though? Let me try. Nope. Doing the same thing. I don't know what it's doing. Let me see if one of my other boxes lets me in. So let's see if this one will let me in. Yeah, that won't let me in. Okay, so this is actually one of our hybrids. And you can see this one's flash-based. But this is one of our hybrids. It's very similar to the all-flash array. But so I'll poke around this one since I couldn't get my all-flash to come up. But what you can see here is we have some very simple information just up front when you log in. We're not trying to overwhelm you with a million different points of information here. But you can see here in this one, all we're really showing you is, hey, how is your capacity being utilized? You can see here I have X amount of volumes here. I can see on a per volume basis how much capacity is being used up, and overall how much do I have available. See here I have about 39 terabytes of available space currently, and so you can get just a quick view there of all of that. What I like to show, one of the things I do like to show is the hardware health, and so what this section does is shows you a physical representation of your unit. So in this section, not only do you get that picture, but you can also see what's going on physically with each one of your controllers. You can see we've already kind of split it here between the left and the right controller. And as it loads here, I'll start talking about some of the things that you can kind of sort of see. But the CPU, memory utilization, the network utilization, things like that. We're just going to show you how much CPU and memory are you utilizing on each controller. And then for network utilization between receives and transmits, we also show you which interfaces are actually utilizing are being utilized, for performance reasons. So you can kind of see, which interfaces are your IOs going through. You can see here for this one in particular, I keep one of my controllers down for demo purposes. You can kind of see what it would look like, just in case if something were to go wrong with the controller. You can see in the middle here we have stars, we have tags, we have a whole bunch of things here on the drives themselves. Anything with a blue tag means it's part of a tier of some sort. Anything with a pink tag means it's part of a cache. And anything with a star means it's means it is an SSD. So for this hybrid, the two in the middle are SSD cache. The two on either side of it are an SSD tier. We have 4 drives, and then the rest are spinning drives. So you can hover over any one of the drives, and you can kind of see some very quick information on it, very simple. And then you can also see these bars that are kind of coming and going on my SSDs here. What those show you are the individual I/O loads on that particular drive every, I believe it's 10 seconds. But you can also hover over the different aspects here, motherboard, CPU, things like that, making sure all of that is well. You can also turn it over to the side, and you can kind of see what's going on in the back of the unit. The power supplies, make sure they're fine. The fans, the interfaces, some quick information, what's the IP, what's the status, what's the speed kind of deal. But then one other thing you can do is you can see my expansion shelves here, so you can see if you do need to expand, you can see that as well. But I want to touch on just one more thing here real quick. like I said, if you do need, if you do want to see a more in-depth demo, obviously just give us a quick shot and we'll set that up. But aside from just being able to see things very easily, we also try to make your, anytime that you have to create anything, make it easy as well. So we have wizards for that. And so what I'm showing you here is our volume wizard. So how do you create a volume? How do you, make sure that it's ready to utilize within your servers? So it's very simple. You just give it a name. I'll just give it test 1, 2, 3, 4. Give it a size. I don't know. I'll do 5 terabytes here. You can see in green. You can always see how much space you have available. You can choose your different tier type, profiles for cache and for tier, whether you want to utilize it, how you want to utilize it, things like that. But then you hit add to list, and you can go through this exercise many times within this one instance of the wizard to create as many volumes as you need. But once you're done with that, you hit finish. Everything starts getting created in the background for you. So by the time that this wizard is done, you have a fully functioning LUN that is ready to show into your servers for connection. But I'm sorry I couldn't show you a little bit more, but I do want to leave a few minutes for questions just in case. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks, George. We are about to wrap up here, so we'll just kind of knock out a couple of quick questions, and then we'll let you guys go. Really appreciate everyone being a part of the presentation today. Let's see. First question comes from Craig. I think, Todd, this one might be a good one for you. Are there still challenges with the number of writes you can have to flash media that would eliminate the need for hybrid or spinning media? I guess trying to figure out is, how reliable are SSDs these days?
Yeah, obviously that's a really good question, and certainly one that people are somewhat concerned about still sometimes when it comes to deploying SSDs. Big advantage of SSDs is the fact that we're able to actually monitor the utilization of the cells within an SSD. I think one of the questions that's being asked there is, are they still susceptible to having write endurance issues? And the answer is yes, but while that susceptibility is there, the good point about what we're able to do with these is we're able to actually monitor when these cells are actually being written to. So it makes it very, we're able to project the actual usage and when a drive is not going to be able to be effective any longer. Obviously, this is far more predictive than what a lot of the older spinning drives were, when they were a little less predictable when they would actually fail. So obviously that's where a big part of where SSDs are going to play.
Great. Next one kind of for George, it looks like. Can you talk about IOPS results for using like Microsoft SQL Server on an all SSD SAN?
Yeah. So I like to joke about the typical engineering answer of it depends. But I'll give you a range. How about that? So typically we see for SQL, obviously depending on how many transactions you have, but I've seen it somewhere between 20 and about 120, 130,000 IOPS that we've been able to push on our system. And to give it a little more credence, not only are we pushing the IOPS, but we're keeping that latency down at the levels that we accept. We can give you that performance, but we're also going to keep your latency down, which is, I think, more important. So.
Terrific. And then last one, it's for Todd. This one came from Tricia. Should we replace our platter drives with SSDs?
I'll kind of default back to what George just said. Of course, it always depends, right? I hope that I pointed out a couple of the conditions where you might want to still consider having spinning drives in your environment, and obviously it just depends. I mean, does your environment really lend itself well to dedupe and compression? Obviously, from a spinning drive perspective, we're able to still achieve really high capacity out of those. So, depending on what your performance metrics look like, depending on how what your data blocks operate, if they're compressible or not, obviously would really dictate whether or not or where the spinning drives versus the SSD comes in. So again, I know that wasn't a very clear answer, but again, of course, it all depends. This is also an area where our iData kind of helps us dig into your environment a little bit better, kind of takes this iffy answer and actually gives us a little bit more concrete as to what our configuration would look like.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Todd. Just opened up a fun poll question. Just kind of, it is kind of an American holiday we have coming up on Sunday with Super Bowl. People want to cast their votes for who they think is going to win the Super Bowl. We got about another 10 seconds left on that poll. If you want to throw in, if you're from Boston or Philadelphia, pretty much know which way you're going. But it actually looks like the winner is a fun little add-in that we threw in there just to see if anybody actually followed football. But it looks like America has spoken, and it looks like the Patriots will win this next Super Bowl by a very slim margin over the Eagles and Beavers. So glad to see those fictional Beavers getting some love there. But that's it for the presentation. Greatly appreciate everyone being a part of it today. Thank you so much. You should be redirected to the website when you exit from WebEx. If you want to get in contact with us via the website, if you have any questions on anything, feel free to touch base anytime. We're always happy to help you in any way that we can. But for myself, Todd, George, and the rest of our team here at StorTrends, thank you again, and have a wonderful day.